She loves your pants.
We're going to get to it.
Yep.
Hello.
What about
Hello.
Jenji's boots?
All right. Let's get started. I have 3 daughters, but I have found that behind every great woman is another woman. Not like standing at the door handing the sack lunch as they go off to work, but women that blaze trails that others can follow and forge paths that others can take, and that's why we are here today. And also, I think it's a very organic moment in our life at Sundance Institute that we have a women's initiative at Sundance Institute, and that is the brainchild of Carrie Putnam, our executive director. And behind that woman is another woman that drives the brawn and the energy behind that, and that's Carolyn Labresco. Yes. And just, this is true confession, we at Sundance, the programmers, watch a lot of television. We have, because it's so smart now and artful and storytelling is happening in television. And one of the most articulate voices on the subject in television is Emily Nussbaum.
Woo!
With her combination of brilliant social analysis and elegant writing that's so friendly, it almost says, let's have coffee. That's Emily. She frames television for us as something to savor, not just because it's pleasurable, but because it gives meaning to our lives and becomes a dominant, resonating thread in the fabric of our culture. Her writing has made us think about female characters in new ways. She shows us that there's an expanding canvas and that a women, female central character can be on television. And we should add that it would be also true in independent film. And now I'm turning over the panel to her, Emily Nussbaum.
Thank you. Hello, welcome. I was going to introduce myself, but that was really lovely. I am the television critic for The New Yorker, and I'm here at a film festival, so I'm slightly out of my element, but it's extremely exciting right now this week to think about all the connections between independent film specifically and TV, which seem to have been overlapping so radically in the last couple of years and changing one another. And I'm especially thrilled to be here with this panel, which is basically a dream come true, as you can see. So I will introduce the panel. First up, Mindy Kaling is a fashionista, a total boss, and a woman with an extremely tight Instagram game. She's the creator of Fox's The Mindy Project, which is the rare network sitcom to feel truly iconoclastic and original and specific to one person. It's sweet and rude in equal proportions, a deconstruction of romantic comedies that also has its own romantic comedy pleasures. And before the Mindy Project, she wrote for The Office, where she joined the writer's room when she was only 24. She's also the author of Is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me? And Other Concerns. And she has an upcoming book that is titled Why Not Me? Which I think is a great title.
Wow, my mic is hot.
At 23, Lena Dunham wrote, directed, and starred in the confessional and dreamy independent movie Tiny Furniture to enormous acclaim. And then at 24, she wrote, directed, and starred in the HBO show Girls, which is completely crazy. Girls really cracked open the landscape of cable television making in many different ways. And like a lot of groundbreaking television and a lot of groundbreaking art in general, it created both enormous passion and 3 million internet flame wars, which burn on to this very day. And last year, she published a wonderful memoir called Not That Kind of Girl. A young woman tells you what she's learned, which is the rare memoir that uses air quotes in the title. Jenji Kohan's Orange is the New Black on Netflix. Is such an addictive, funny, smart, sexy show that as soon as I got the first 6 episodes, which I got in screener form, as critics do, I essentially ignored my family completely in order to gulp them down. The show is set in a women's prison, and it's the rare ensemble that focuses not just on women's lives, but on a huge diversity of different kinds of women, rarely shown on television. Black, brown, white, old, straight, gay, butch, femme, transgendered, and it also has great male characters, including one with a band called Side Boob. Like a lot of the television that I love, and a lot of the films I love as well, and certainly the shows and projects that people on this panel create, it's a mixture of humane and abrasive, pulpy and heartfelt. Before that, Jenji made Showtime's Weeds, and she was a writer on 6 Feet Under. No?
6 Feet Under?
Oh, how did I?
Still.
Oh my God. Genji, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I loved that show. I watched all of 6 Feet Under.
And that's an accomplishment in and of
Yes.
itself.
What a great start. Kristen Wiig starred in and co-wrote the blockbuster comedy hit Bridesmaids, which is a movie that I saw 3 separate times in the theater with 3 separate people, and each time I loved it more and got more out of it. And that movie, I think for a lot of viewers, felt like an enormous event. But the great thing about her is that she makes everything that she's in feel that way, whether she's playing smaller roles, like in Friends with Kids, where she made me cry with this one tiny moment, or in The Skeleton Twins, or on Saturday Night Live, where her specialty has been...
They weren't sure about that one.
where her specialty has been women who are slightly broken or awkward or a little bit too much, but impossible to look away from. She's a Sundance regular, and at this year's festival, she's appearing in not 1 but 2 films, Nasty Baby and Diary of a Teenage Girl. Welcome, everyone. So I want to start with a clip. So go on Orange is the New Black.
Hey, how's this whole agenda thing work?
I got a lot of those. Specify.
The gay agenda to take over the world?
Okay. First of all, keep your voice down. This shit is top secret.
Are you gonna let all the men die out?
Oh, fuck no. You know, bookkeeping, janitorial, fetch and carry, that kind of shit.
What about for sex? Because I know I like how they smell kind of funky, and they're big, and they have dicks and all that.
Well, maybe. But when you're done, you gotta toss them away like trash. I mean, the whole point of this is chicks digging each other and being in charge.
Let's say I want to join, right?
Okay, let's say that.
Would I have to do anything disgusting against the word of God? You know? I'm talking about you, pussy, if you catch my drift.
Yeah, I hear you. And that is a big part of it, I'm not gonna lie. But since you have these actions, probably give you an exemption. I mean, we're not unreasonable.
Really? That'd be great.
Of course, you're still gonna have to go through the initiation.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah.
I love that show. I'm so excited for the next season. I was reading a lot of stuff in preparation for the panel, and I read this list that the novelist Curtis Sittenfeld made of things that she'd learned as a writer, and the number 13 was Female writers are asked more frequently about all the following topics than male writers: whether their work is autobiographical, whether their characters are likable, whether their unlikable characters are unlikable on purpose, or whether the writer didn't realize what she was doing, and how they managed to write after having children. So is your work autobiographical? No, I actually wanted to ask whether, it's the funny thing about being on a panel with all women and talking about women in art, and I wondered whether you feel that it's a satisfying thing or a pigeonholing thing, ghettoizing, to talk about your work in relationship with other women. Because this happens a lot. I'm sure you guys have been on other panels about women in art, and we're going to talk a lot about that stuff. But does it seem like a useful category, or does it seem limiting?
I mean, it's great to talk about your work in the company of other women who you think are awesome. So that's fine. And often on panels with men, it's sometimes hard to get heard because they love to hear themselves talk. So that's okay. But it can feel like a ghetto. It's like, oh, it's the chick panel. Nora Ephron, there was that quote you used to talk.
Things I won't miss when I die.
Yeah.
Panels about women in film.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a double-edged sword, you know.
I was going to say this panel is great because this is one of the rare panels where I feel that our work actually has a real kinship. And sometimes it's a thing where there's like only 2 gay people in a small town, so you set them up even though they have nothing in common. Like that's what a lot of panels about women in television are, but these happen to be women who inspire me and who I feel kindred to. And, you know, in terms of questions like the one Curtis is talking about, my sort of line is always, I don't mind being asked questions about my femininity or my femaleness. That's a huge part of my identity, and it feels super powerful. What I mind are lazy questions or unwittingly misogynistic questions. Talking about being female isn't in and of itself problematic. Like identity is a part of what all of us do. Yeah. But there's a lazy set of questions presented to you by journalists who are, you know, walking from person to person at a junket and go like, look, it's a vagina. Here's the 9 things I know to ask the vagina.
I think it's just it's like a snob thing. I like being on a panel with these guys because these are the best shows, not just with strong female characters. These are the best shows on TV. For me, I'm excited to be on a panel with other show creators. But it is funny, those questions, because, you know, when you get asked, how do you feel writing for male characters? How do you balance it all? And you're like, is Steve Levitan and David Benioff asked how they feel for writing for male characters? Yeah. It's like, no, it's like, they're not asked how it feels like to write for female characters on their shows. And we admire, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, I admire both of those writers a lot. So
funny fact, nice. Mindy actually writes all of Julie Bowen's scenes on Modern Family because he can't do it. He can't do it.
Yeah, I do feel like sometimes the word female is sort of added to the beginning of questions or things like that. I remember with Bridesmaids, people kept talking about it being a female comedy. I'm like, why do you call it a female comedy? Because when you talk about other comedies that have men in them, I've never heard the phrase male comedy ever in my life. And I'm like, it's a comedy. Like, why can't it just be a comedy? And I get why they're saying female comedy. I'm not upset by it. I understand it. It's mostly women, and that is rarer than it should be. But it's also just, it's a comedy. Like, funny's funny, you know?
You know, it's funny with Bridesmaids. I remember getting emails from people saying, people were recommending the movie. They were also saying, make sure this movie is seen because they'll never make another movie about women again. Which was really disturbing to me at the time. And it actually, I wanted to ask you guys about your experience in television and movies, because this year it seems particularly striking to me. At the Golden Globes, all the nominees for comedy were women. And really,
and Mike Judge.
And Mike Judge.
But he's super just like, No, I'm joking.
His skin is really soft.
Mike Judge's skin is extremely soft. That's the outcome of this panel. And there really has been an astonishing boom on television, not only in the shows that you've done, but Shonda Rhimes' shows, Jill Soloway's Transparent, Getting On, The Good Wife, Broad City, Top of the Lake. I mean, there's a million of them. And then, meanwhile, the Oscar nominations came out, and they're almost entirely white men, and there's a lot of discussion about diversity in Hollywood. I realize it's different in a place like Sundance in terms of the setup, but you know, Mandola Dargis has also been writing about how difficult it is for female directors. So straightforwardly, is TV better for women than movies? And if so, why? What's your experience with this? And you have different stances, like different.
I don't know if I guess from SNL was really my only TV experience, really, but I will say the entire 40 years it's been on the air, it's been maybe 10 cast members that are male and maybe 3 or 4 that are women. That's just the way that it is. When I was at the Groundlings, it was the same thing. There's 30 members in the company, and there were always like 26 guys and like 4 girls. That's just kind of the way that it was, and it's so nice. Someone's talking back there.
Shut it down.
It's a guy too. He's like, what are these guys talking about out there? I don't know. I've been on TV, and I feel like I actually want to hear what you guys have to say about this.
I mean, TV's great for women right now. There's just a lot more opportunity, it seems. It's a great landscape. It seems like movies are way behind.
Well, what changed? Because this really wasn't as true. I mean,
isn't it though? Like I always felt the TV between, obviously, I Love Lucy, Rhoda, Mary Tyler Moore.
It was a place for progressive female
right,
characters.
AbFab, and I've always felt that it was. It's hard when you have these questions because you can't speak for everyone else's experience.
Sure. I
came from a show. I came from The Office, where my voice was considered special because it wasn't seen that much on television. But I felt that TV was just a place. Shonda Rhimes has a bunch of shows, and they're all starring dark-skinned women, and they get huge ratings, and that's normal in TV. So, I don't necessarily see that reflected in like independent film as much, which is why that seems much more of a scarier arena.
But also, like commercial television, you're selling products. You have to, and women watch television, buy products, and you have to market to that audience. And it seems like film is trying to capture that 18 to 35 male audience more than anything else. And it's more important, it seems, in film to capture that male audience. And television wants, at least the networks seem to originally wanted to capture a female audience more. So they had to have these female-driven shows. So there was that opportunity initially.
Yeah, there were women sitting at home watching television and buying mops.
And you had to cater to that.
90% of the people who watch my show are mop buyers. Yes. We have storylines about it just so we can.
You have to design your own mop.
Yes.
Use it on the show. There we go.
I came from independent film. I made 2 independent films, and then after Tiny Furniture, had the opportunity to, take a terrifying trip to Los Angeles and have a number of meetings, and it became very clear to me very quickly that the kinds of stories I wanted to tell were not going to get told by studios. I mean, I would sit down in these meetings with guys who would go, "We loved your movie. It was so fresh. We've never seen anything like it. Do you want to write the Strawberry Shortcake movie?" And you're like, "No, I want to keep making the kind of movie I made before." And HBO was the only place that was open to that. HBO was the place that said, "Oh, that thing you made, make more of it." And whereas every other meeting was people attempting to parlay some tiny little snippet of what I had done, and it would be like, "We want something that's like your movie, but it's Anne Hathaway," and so it's.
Yeah, but even now, having done Weeds and Orange, whenever I'm offered movies, it's weddings and moms, and it's like, do you have any idea what? Have you watched anything I've written? It's so weird to me that all I'm offered are weddings and moms. No offense to Project.
Oh, no.
And that was different. That was not a wedding movie in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
That was a flip it on its side wedding movie.
Exactly.
Sure.
She subverted the dominant paradigm.
Yes, she did.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I'll take that.
Nice liberal
Yes,
arts
Thanks.
work there.
You can tell me what that means when we're done.
I was asking for questions on Twitter, and somebody said to ask whether you thought that on television there was a growing old girls network, because I know that you and Jenny have sought out other female showrunners, and you said that you were working on Jane the Virgin and trying to draw connections.
We stalk basically every woman working in television and force them to have long, boozy dinners with us, and then want to feel deeply connected and like we're we're all holding, like all women holding hands around an abortion clinic, but like we're women holding hands around like.
Think of how we could
Fox
abuse it.
Studios.
That's very nice. Think of how we could abuse an all women's network.
That would be my favorite if guys started being like, it's impossible to get into Hollywood. There's this old women's network.
I passed around to you guys this interview with Bjork that I found strangely emotional to the point that I became teary while reading a Q&A in Pitchfork, which was a little
incredible.
shocking.
It was really cool.
It was really beautiful, but I also found it a little. I don't know whether you read it. Like she says things like the world has a difficult time with the female auteur, and specifically she talks about not being given as much credit for her work when she collaborates with men. And personally, I found this upsetting because I think of Bjork as essentially a goddess, not a human being. And so the idea that she was having trouble being heard seemed shocking to me. And I was interested in how open she was about it. I wondered whether you identified with it at all or it didn't speak to your experience.
Well, she also has a really high voice, so it's hard to
in being heard?
No one can hear it.
No one
can hear it.
That's the problem.
All the dogs in the neighborhood were like, I agree, Bjork.
Did that seem like something that...
Well, we should tell people what she said. She said she has to say things 5 times before she's heard, or she would let a guy say what she said to get it heard, or
she'd call in a male producer, and even though he would just finish off the last, eighth of her album, he would get the production credit.
And even when the men would say no, she did the bulk of the work, they would still get the credit.
Jenny, my producing partner, made an amazing point, which is like, she should just work with girls. And because the fact is that kind of,
But that's a bummer, because there are great guys out there. Like,
yeah.
You shouldn't have to just limit yourself to one gender. You want to work with whoever's the best at what they're doing. I don't think it's necessarily like, I should only work with women because men take all the credit. That would be a bummer to limit yourself. But yeah, it is a problem, and it is sad, and I don't, it was disheartening.
Has that been your experience at all? Because I know we talked at one point about what it was like to work on The Office, where you felt like you both benefited, but were also like had a different style than a lot of people on the writing staff. Like, was that, or does this not speak to you as a?
No, it does. I mean, we all. I can speak less for Jenji, but we've all collaborated with men. Judd Apatow, Greg Daniels, Lorne Michaels, who have seen great promise in us and have helped us shape our voices. And I have not felt, though I truly believe and I feel empathy and sympathy for Bjork's experience, which probably is more pervasive than I think. My experience is that I've only worked with men who are feminists, and I only hire men who are feminists. And luckily for me, because I'm an actor, I'm also the face of my show. So the idea of credit not being given to me is like kind of not, it's in the name of my show. So I have not felt that by my design, my devious design. But I'm luckily, and now I'm at a place where I don't have to work with men or women who I feel are, don't want to share credit or not feminist. It's just not interesting to me to do that now.
I have to say I've had a very similar experience. I went from an independent film with my mom and my sister inside our house, in which we literally sent my father away for 2 months, to working on a show where Jenny Kohan and our executive producer Eileen Landris and our line producer Gina Heyman. I mean, we've created this kind of utopia where we are the final word, and we have an incredible relationship with Judd, who's given us a lot of space and power to tell stories the way that we want to, and lent us, the best parts of his mind without restricting us in any way. And so, of course, I recognize that many women I know, love, respect, are caught in situations where they don't feel their voices are being heard creatively. And one of my big goals as someone who's now entering the world of producing with Jenny is to shift that paradigm. But I've had this sort of fairy tale experience that I know does not reflect the industry standard.
I've had a mixed bag because I grew up in comedy rooms, and one of my favorite was an old comedy writer told me if God had meant for women to be in a writer's room, he wouldn't have made tits so distracting. And, and lovely things like that. There was definitely trial by fire. But you come back swinging, and it's different now, and my rooms are different, and you see some power, and you make your room different, and you train a new generation of people to run their rooms differently, and it shifts.
So let's go to the girls' classroom clip, and this takes place at Hannah is now in Iowa, and she is being criticized. It's a little truncated as a clip. It's not quite the whole thing, but it's a flavor of it.
Okay. What is the story about?
It's about a really privileged girl deciding that she's just gonna let someone abuse her.
Yeah, that's what it's about.
Honestly, I was very distracted by how 50 Shades it was.
I actually haven't read 50 Shades.
Hannah, you have to sit tight until we're done discussing.
Okay.
In some ways, I was struggling not to be offended because it seemed to really trivialize the very real abuse suffered by some. Maybe else felt that way.
That was just one paragraph.
Anything else? No? Okay.
There was more.
I know. There's more in the scene, and it's funny, and there's eating. And I want to talk about shock and humor, and the question of how humor that pushes over lines and potentially offends people works, because it's some of my favorite, one of my favorite qualities about all the stuff that you guys do. And I was talking to Jenji earlier about this, and she told me about something about jars that were in the writer's room. Could you talk about that a little bit? And then I want to talk about...
We have lots of jars in our... Well, I actually hate the jars. They started... You got to put money in jars when certain things come up. There's like jars now. It started because two of the guys who are theater guys were talking too much about theater, so we got a theater jar, and every time they bought a theater, they had to put money in the theater jar. And then there's a theater jar, the bougie jar, the judgy jar, the too far jar, the pun jar, and there's more jars.
Why
There's
do
a
you
bunch
hate
of
the jars?
I hate the jars because I feel like it makes people self-conscious and limits speech. Like, and I won't put money in them because I like puns and I like going too far and I like all these things. But there were a few. Oh, and the name drop jar.
That's an important jar. You should have that jar.
Yeah.
Where does the money go?
Well, at the end, I guessed how much closest to how much was in all the jars got to keep the money. And theoretically, you were supposed to donate it, but the PA got it, and so she just kept it. Which is
That's okay.
Yeah, because we go there and all of those things. Yeah, so we have all those jars. But I don't like the jars, and I don't contribute to them. But we have all.
But
the
you
jars.
allow them to happen.
I allow them all to happen.
That's
Absolutely.
Great. That's great.
And they all have pictures on them.
You need morale.
Oh, and there's the jar jar. There's the
jar
jar. Because if you propose because there were so many jars that if you propose a new jar, you have to put money in the jar jar.
That's great.
And there's a picture of Jar Jar on the jar jar.
Yeah.
Is there a time for any of you that you've that you pulled back from a joke that you thought went too far for what you were creating and then regretted it? Could you tell me about the joke? Tell me about the joke that you almost put on but then didn't, and why? And
No, we're not gonna fall for that trap.
Yeah.
Why?
No.
Too far, like it's like
This is a frank and honest,
somebody?
transparent.
Didn't go
Like
in
offending?
for a reason.
I'm on a network
Yeah.
television show. I'd be arrested right now if we put in all the jokes that we want to put on
I've
our
fallen
show.
for that frank and honest trap.
Yes.
before. It's so sad. You did panels with us 4 years ago, and we were like,
Blah, blah,
rate
blah.
this, blah, blah, blah.
Ray
And
writes
now-
this, and this.
I
And
know, and now we're just like these little media trained, we cannot do this. Twitter is everywhere. But no, there's definitely times that we have stories we want to tell, and there are things that we find funny, but recognize that they'll push buttons, and sometimes that's fine, and sometimes you're not up for the fight. It's sort of like you just have to pick the hill that you're willing to die on. And I feel like there have been plenty of times where people have felt we've gone too far on the show, and we've been able to stand behind them because we really understood what we were doing and why. And so my line is sort of, if I don't feel I can justify something, if I don't feel I can sit here and explain to you why it felt appropriate and worked for me, then nothing that I can't stand behind should be on the screen.
I love having to explain to the network some of our things. It's not rape, it's a rape opportunity. You know, it's like trying to smooth over some of the things. Just like trying to just use language you know, if you're really not going to censor, and if this is the freedom of streaming media, then we're going to take advantage. But I think when you have this opportunity, you have to be, it has to serve story. And to just be, we're going to shock just to fuck you, shock. It's sloppy.
You know, it doesn't come across as funny.
No, it's not funny and it's not useful. You have to serve story. You have to serve character. It has to be real. It has to be grounded. You can't be reckless with it, or it loses all meaning. And it's not. It's sloppy.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to lose things that are really funny at the table or at a table read or in the editing room. And you just have to lose it because it's like it doesn't add to story at all. It's just.
Can you give me an example of?
I mean, it happens on SNL all the time because you have to constantly cut stuff down and make it shorter and more concise and joke. And sometimes something really funny that it went well at dress, and then it's like we don't have time. You have to cut this whole section. And sometimes it's great. I mean, that's different because it's a sketch as far as story. But yeah, with writing movies, it's the same thing. You have to lose whole scenes and set pieces because it doesn't work, or someone else just did it, and you just watched it, and you're like, fuck. We just wrote that.
Occasionally, because we're restrained, of course, because we're on network television, and we actually have a really pretty supportive attorney at Fox who I feel like I'm in more than constant interaction with. We had an episode called It Slipped this season.
It was about anal sex.
Yeah, and we never mentioned it, and we couldn't even get too close to mentioning it. But what I've noticed is that it made me not underestimate the audience. Like, they knew what we were talking about, and it became a little bit more artful because we couldn't really talk about it head on. And that was kind of, I think that sort of made me a better writer. So occasionally, those things are, make you better.
What would you put on the show if you were on cable?
Oh man, I'm like a pervert. So like for me, I think that if I was on cable or another platform, it would not be good for me right now. Mm-hmm. But like, I mean, it's really, I mean, to come from.
We need to get Mindy on cable.
Yeah, we do.
Just be written off as just.
I just spilled on myself. Sorry.
No, but I have it's very fun to watch these shows because I think my desires are very prurient desires. When I watch them, I'm like, oh, it's delicious. So it's actually good that I'm on Fox. But I think there's some intimate stuff that you can't show, and I think the way that people talk, sometimes you have to alter slightly for a network show. And
I keep trying to get specific examples from you guys, but
I know, why are we being such cunts?
Well, here's the thing. I'm not scared about my nudity, but on television, you can't.
Sure. No, I understand. It's behind the.
Yeah.
Something I'll say about the sort of too far thing, the hashtag too far thing, is that I think what we are currently forgetting in America, it's become. I mean, I think it's in some way America is at its most puritanical, and the fact is like. People are forgetting that humor is a tool for debate and humor is a tool for expression. And when people say things that offend you, like you have the power to turn off your television, you have the power not to buy that book, you have the power, but like sort of boycott, censorship, shut them down approach to humor is shows a very basic lack of understanding about what humor can do for us culturally and what it has always done.
You know, it's interesting because I've been thinking specifically about the way that female audiences seem to react differently than male audiences to disturbing or unsettling characters who act in ways that they wouldn't act. And I don't know whether you feel this way. I sometimes call it the go-girl problem, where you get fans who are very passionate about seeing female representation, but also feel very strongly that the character should represent them and be a kind of role model for them. I know you and I had talked about that before, and I wonder whether that rings true for you. To me, it does seem more true of the female audience, and I wondered whether you consider your characters antiheroes and whether they're sort of in that realm for you, or...
we talk a lot, I think, on my show, especially about likability. And likability is not remotely important to me. Relatability is very important to me. And I think they sort of go hand in hand. And I think that I was thinking, you know, when you're a feminist, you want to have the character, there's a side of you that can be a little bit like, oh, I want to be very prescriptive, and I want to show the character as an ideal for all women, especially Indian American women who are not represented on television. And then you get a really fucking boring character, you know, and that she's just very perfect and Pollyannish. So you have to, and then I'm a contrarian and an artist, so I also want her to say, you know, things that can maybe offend. And I think that is striking a balance. And recently my character said something on the show where she says, you know what, she's very frustrated. I am so sick of people saying that birth control leads to premarital sex. And as a feminist, you're like, yes, good, someone's saying that. I believe that personally, politically I believe that. And then she says, because you know what leads to premarital sex? Alcohol, black music, and hotness. And so if you thought the character was like a certain way at the beginning, you thought she was like a good, strong female character, she then said this other thing that you're like, oh my God, that's incredibly offensive. Like, who is that?
I was really into the moment where she was like kind of pro-guns for a second.
Well, I got a lot of, I remember that was very interesting too, because she is like, I should be able to have a gun.
I thought it was amazing.
And, but she's so wrong-headed about it. She would have murdered half of her staff. At that point, but she believes she needs one because people are constantly trying to attack her because she's so beautiful, you know? And so if you take it at face value, it's, and more than any other, I think a lot of male characters, people do think that what my character says is what I believe, which I sometimes think wouldn't happen, but.
I think you find that's true for you as well.
Of course, and people have so much, I mean, there's a reason people have trouble differentiating between me and my character, Mindy and her character. We basically share a name. You guys do share a name. There are stylistic similarities. We have the same voice. We have the same face. But at the end of the day, like, I don't think that, you know, Larry David or Woody Allen or anyone else playing some version of themselves is walking around with a million people who think that they know and understand them on a deep and abiding level, or that everything they say in their films. I mean, Woody Allen is proof that people don't think everything he says in his films is stuff that he does, because all he was doing was making out with 17-year-olds for years, and he didn't say a word about it. So, and then he did it a bunch.
No, in Manhattan, he's making out with
no,
a 17-year-old.
that's what I'm saying, and no one went, oh, Woody Allen's making out with a 17-year-old in Manhattan. I guess he's a real perv. Whereas, like, and then, lo and behold, whereas
he fell in love.
He fell in love.
I'm just kidding.
He fell in love. And
someone.
who are we to stop that? But whereas I say one thing in the show and am accused of, you know, having, you know, aired.
But Hannah's like, it's a ridiculous character so much of the time. She's saying, you know, at the very beginning, I'll never forget in the pilot when she said, I think I'm the voice of a generation or a generation, and everyone's like, Lena Dunham thinks she's the voice of a generation. It's like,
she was
obviously her
drugs
character,
during the scene.
she falls to the floor, high on drugs,
and says, I think I'm the voice of my generation.
Yeah.
And it's like a beat generation joke, and it never. I mean, I've accepted now that it's going to be like for better or worse on my grave, but it's yeah, it is a confusing thing when people equate the words that come out of your character's mouth with some real life philosophy that you absolutely don't possess, and they think that as.
But I have to believe Larry David is absolutely Larry David.
I mean, I did meet him, and I can't say I saw major differences. I'm just talking about the way saying that he moves through the world probably, like, Larry David does heinous things on that show, and people don't accuse him of being someone who, you know, walks into women's shelters and triggers abused women. Whereas it's like, I'm not just using myself as an example, but I'm the example that I currently have, where people are like, she is so high on her own supply with that voice of a generation stuff. And so, you know, you just have to navigate it.
Do you, this doesn't seem true for you in the characters that you play, but do people ever?
Because if I was the characters that I play, I would be locked up. Whenever you do, I just said it today when someone was asking me about the movie they just did. I was like, it's a movie. Yeah. It's a character. And they do always ask you, like, what do you have in common with your character? And sometimes I don't really want to say, because I also don't want anyone to know anything about me, in not a healthy way, I think. But I don't really know what my point is.
Let's go to the Kristen clip.
Should I just keep going? Really? Let's go to the clip? That's how we're going to transition?
Yes.
Okay, great.
not. You're in the wrong decade.
You are.
Okay, I am.
You are.
Thank you.
Holy shit, what did you give her?
Miss?
No, it's not me.
Yes, it is you. Please go back to your seat.
Yes, I'm with him. I'm Mrs. Iglesias. Mrs. Iglesias.
No, you're not. You were just out here and you put sunglasses on. Out.
But I don't want to. Sir, she can have my seat, okay? Everyone should experience first class at least once in their lives, and Annie shouldn't miss out just because she can't afford it.
No, ma'am, I'm afraid that's not allowed.
Help me, I'm poor.
No, listen, we're a whole wedding party. I'm the bride. I'm getting married. The seat's empty. She's obviously nervous. We'll calm her down a
You know
bit.
what? I understand, but Claire is right.
Everybody go back to your seats.
Okay, you especially. You have 3 seconds to get back to your seat.
Oh, you can't get anywhere in 3 seconds.
Well, you better try.
You're setting me up for a loss already.
Okay, thank you.
Whatever you say, Stove.
It's Steve.
Stove. What kind of name is that?
Well, that's not a name. My name is Steve.
Are you an appliance?
No, I'm a man, and my name is Steve.
You're a flight attendant.
That's absolutely accurate. You can close that. Thank you.
Don't you just want to get into bed and watch the whole thing now so bad?
What? Say that?
I just said now I want to get into bed and watch the whole thing so bad. I got the pleasure of seeing the long version in Judd Apatow's office with every single joke in there, and it was
I
like
think I've ever seen that.
3.5 hours of heaven.
Judd, clearly.
Yeah.
Because you're a woman. You don't get the. You're not
Yeah, that's what it is.
Judd
Yeah.
It's like The Fugitive, where if it's on TV, you can't not watch the entire thing. Right.
I cannot watch the entire. It's hard. It's hard to
Is
watch.
it hard to watch? This
Yes, I didn't watch SNL the whole time I was on it.
Is that right?
Yeah, I can't. There's movies I've done that I haven't seen. I don't like watching
Which
myself. Well, I don't want to say because then I feel like they might be offended. And also, I've told all of them that I've seen them. So I don't want to be like, it was great. It was great. So, yeah.
It was interesting to me. I saw an interview where you said that with the Skeleton Twins, when you made it, you thought of it as a serious movie, and people were laughing in the theater, just more than you guys expected. Do you feel like because you've done full comedy that people take your more dramatic roles as they expect that of you?
It's happened. I mean, the first time it happened was I did this movie called Hate Ship, Love Ship, and
So beautiful. You have to see it.
I was with my friend, and people were laughing at things that I was like, okay, this is like my serious thing, and they were laughing, and I wanted to be like this is serious. And like, there's one scene where I like kiss myself in the mirror. I'm like practicing kissing, and I remember when we shot it, we were like, oh my God, this is so sad, like poor thing, and people were laughing, and I remember I didn't quite know how to feel. I was a little bothered by it at first because I got nervous that people just weren't going to take me seriously ever. And I really tried in that movie, and it was like the first really dramatic thing that I had done. But I get it. I mean, people know you how they know you, and even when I go to like a dinner, people are like, talk in a voice or something. Or when I do interviews with people, sometimes I can see how disappointed and bored they are because I'm just like, oh yeah, everything's fine. I'm not like a real showy person, and I think people assume if they know you from comedy, especially from SNL, because it's so big and you act so crazy on that show, people think, like we were saying, that's who you are, and then I just run around New York with like wigs on, like walking up to people and like punching them in the stomach, and I'm really not. I'm not that person at all.
That's also part of the gift. Like, I really loved Hate Ship, Love Ship. I actually wrote an essay about it. But
I know.
But part of the gift that you brought to that movie was the ability to bring this kind of levity to this super tragic character that people don't regularly see in quiet, independent films. And in that way, it was kind of this little revolution. And I think the moments when people needed to feel it, they felt it.
Thank you. Thanks, Lena.
Do you want to make more TV, or do you want to stick with independent films? Are you making conscious choices about that, or?
So many of my choices are not conscious. I mean, really. I mean, there's not. I don't have like a grand plan. I kind of just, if something comes to me or I love something, I want to do it. Even with independent films, I feel like I've definitely made more of those than bigger studio movies. And people ask me all the time, like, well, why? You're obviously making, such a choice to just like, fuck the studios. I'm like, it's really not what I'm doing. It's the script, and I'll read something and I love it, and it's like, we don't have money. Okay, well, let's find money. Let's find a director. Let's make this. This is really special. Or if it's a script that it's a studio, I'm like, okay, great. So we already have money. That's great. But I don't really make my decisions that way. I will say I do love being on sets of independent films because there is such a rally. You don't have time. You don't have money. Everyone's hungry, everyone's tired, and you're making this movie that a lot of people worked really hard on, and some people didn't think would ever get made, and I just love the spirit of that part of filmmaking, and TV too.
Do you have any desire to make any more TV?
No.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Never.
No, I would. I mean, if the right thing came along, absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Because one of the questions that somebody wanted me to ask you was, to tell you to make a television show and to ask you all for the advice that they would give you on your television show.
Ladies.
Yes. Seems a little inappropriate. One thing I'm wondering, and this is for all of you, is as you've gotten more successful, you've also become more high profile, more visually recognizable, and people respond to you, I would assume, differently. And this is really different for TV showrunners who are not actresses, especially. I wondered how much that's changed you personally as an artist. Like, do you feel that it's altered the way in which you think about the world, or the way in which you respond to the world, or?
You mean by being recognized?
By being recognized,
yeah. It's weird.
How so?
And it's kind of awful sometimes. I don't mean to, no one wants to hear someone complain about being recognized, but sometimes it can be difficult when you just want to be the person you were when you could just, walk down the street, and you know that the person who sees you isn't going to either try to take a picture or tell someone oh, I just saw Kristen, she looks really tired, or something, because that happens. I don't know, I try to articulate how I feel about this because I really don't want to sound like a douchebag that's annoyed by it, but I do think there's a balance between, someone liking your, sorry, my nose is running. Someone liking your work and wanting to take your picture and wanting to talk to you, and other people just doing it without asking your permission just so they can put it somewhere. And there's such a weird, because we all have phones and we all have cameras and there's no privacy anymore, and sometimes it really bums me out. But I don't want to end on a bad note, so I will say, yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's weird. Because you go your whole life without it, and then everything's different. It's weird.
In terms of how it affects storytelling, I feel more worried about when you're successful and you have more money. I don't want to be one of these out-of-touch storytellers that you see with all these times where they're just talking about, their movies are just about these problems that you're like, this is so fucking unrelatable. The more successful you get, the more sort of rarefied and more comfortable you get in things. And you see these filmmakers that you love, and now they're telling stories about the horrors of a certain private school that their kids could get into when they used to be telling stories about coming up in Brooklyn or something. So I think that's the harder thing is, to me, is just trying to not feel isolated.
You want to avoid it's hard to communicate with your maid story.
Yes.
Oh, thanks.
Well, I didn't leave my house very much before, and I don't leave my house very much now, so everything is exactly as it was.
One thing that's really different about television than movies, and it's funny, as a TV critic, I often felt like I'm trying to note what's different about the two, and TV historically has been episodic, takes place over years, and so it's more collaborative. That's all changing in a lot of ways, because you produce your show, so you produce the whole season at once. But the one thing that does keep going with TV specifically, there's sort of a loop with the audience where with a movie, you put the whole thing out, then people respond to it, and it's just a one-time thing. I'm actually wondering for you about how your shows have changed in between seasons. What the conversations have been like internally about where you're going with it and how much you're affected by audience response. I mean, if you want to start, you had a facial expression, so I was going to start with you. Because I do feel like your show is very different than it was at the beginning. It was about a girl dating a lot of guys, a boyfriend. Like, what is the internal conversation about where you're going with it?
You know, I've always been my personality is very people-pleasing, A student, like I'm addicted to feedback. And I think that starting this show, I really had to throw that aside. And we've never been a show with giant ratings, and we've always just been on a network that has supported us nonetheless. And so I think I have to tell stories that are interesting to me and reflect how I'm maturing. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of the show, you know, we do almost 2 seasons worth of a show on a cable network in 1 season. So it's almost like it's twice as much time. So when Mindy was single for 2 years, it was like 4 seasons of a cable show. Yeah. And at a certain point, it's just like, how many more dudes can this girl have sex with? It's like, you know, and so it's sort of, you get exhausted.
That was the original title of the show.
How many dudes can this girl have sex with?
It's a good title.
And so it seemed natural after 50 episodes or so that this guy who was sort of in love with her, and we try that as an experiment.
Did you have conversations in between the seasons about ways to change the show?
No, we don't consciously say how we're going to change. And I'm really kind of retarded with the social media thing. I don't tweet, and I'm not big with that. And
your cast is killing it on social media.
I know, they're awesome.
They're I
great.
follow them all, and I take pleasure in it.
Yeah, no, they're the best. But it's basically, we come back every year and we just talk about the room, what we're interested in, and what we want to talk about in the conversation that is piquing our interest, and where the characters are leading us, and take it from there. And that's kind of how we've always operated.
To me, as a viewer in the second season, I felt like there was a distinct villain, and a lot of the characters, more of the characters had, in the first season, there were backstories, but in general, they were sympathetic backstories. There were more unsympathetic backstories in the second season.
Right.
Was that a conscious?
Yeah, I mean, we came back and we wanted to amp it up, and you don't want to have sophomore slump, and you fall deeper in love with these people. And after first season, we knew them so much better, these characters, and we just wanted more, and we wanted to go deeper. And you know, it just starts with weeks and weeks of conversation about these women, and the stories and the themes come out of that. But it's very insular. And also we're all news junkies, and we're all story junkies, and we bring in articles, and we bring in stories, and we bring in speakers, and we talk and talk and talk, and from that come the themes and narratives of what we want in the next season. And we also, every season, we have a slush pile going of things that, if they don't fit here, they'll go into the future. If we have a future season, they'll come in the season.
I think we've spent our time between seasons regrouping, trying to understand what we've done, and really the same thing Jenji said, which is just kind of feeling where our interest lies and where these characters are pulling us, because we have to have an organic sort of passion for the story that we're telling. And so sometimes it's reflective of something that we've been through in the off season. Right. Sometimes it's reflective of the journey that we're on with the show, and we find a way to kind of transmogrify that onto our characters, if you will.
That scene that we showed before has an obvious, very meta feeling about criticisms of the show.
Yeah, and we never want it to turn into, a wink, wink, we know what you're saying about what we're saying about what you're saying thing, mm-hmm. But we also, the reaction to a show is a part of our lives, and is also reflective of what it feels like to be a young female artist, which is what this character is. And so it all fits very tidily together. And in terms of how the show's changed, I think by our 4th season, there was just I'm very proud, we're very proud of every season that we've done, but there are definitely moments where we veered closer to satire and moments where we tried things that were more dramatic. And it's just, I think our tone has become clearer to us as we've continued to go. And of course we want to continue to experiment, but we just understand more automatically what our characters and what our story can hold.
I want to go to the Mindy clip. which is
Yay.
the Mindy clip with the fire escape.
What are you, crazy? Your door was wide open. What if I'd been a murderer?
Well, if you'd been a murderer, I would have stabbed you with my knife. Oh, God. Oh, I'm so sorry. Great, Danny. I probably just killed someone, and I lost my best knife.
Okay, Zorro.
Zorro?
Yeah.
I'm too young to understand that reference. I don't know how we're gonna be in a relationship if you don't trust me.
I do trust you. If you just shut up for a second, I can prove it to you.
And you shouldn't tell your girlfriend, shut up. It's not nice.
Okay, so I made a list. I was once a stripper named Diamond Dan, and I did it to pay for med school. And the savings helped me pay off my mother's mortgage on her house. I always told you I didn't have a middle name. That's not true. It's Alan. It's actually my dad's name. I just hated him so much I wanted to pretend it didn't exist.
Can I tell you one?
Sure.
I think the reason that I tell everyone about us is because I want it to be real. And the more real it seems, the less likely it is that it could all get taken away from me.
It's real. Okay. All right. Okay, when I was in the 4th and 5th grade, my mother couldn't afford a backpack, so I carried a purse to school.
Go inside.
Okay.
Oh my God, we need to get out of there.
You know, I actually got chills on my neck. Wasn't that sweet and romantic? Mindy, we were on a panel last year, and you said something about how you regarded Tyler Perry as a role model. And I didn't follow up, and I've always wanted to follow up on that. So I was wondering, how is Tyler Perry a role model for you?
Well, Tyler Perry, and I don't know how much you know about Tyler Perry, but I have such a fondness for Tyler Perry because he had such a difficult childhood and has built essentially an empire. You know, he came up through theater. It's never been easy for him at all, and created this character which would be so improbably successful in Medea, which he played. And I became not only incredibly a character that people feel like is part of their own family, but could be a movie star himself, and then has now created so many shows and was in Gone Girl and was excellent in that. But he's just so powerful, and you know, I played Matt Damon in the Fringe Festival in 2001, and to see someone who seemed like such an outsider, who became so powerful and so important to so many people, was very moving to me. Also, he's rich as hell, and that's important too. But and he's producing works for other people who might not have their voice heard. So I think he's great.
Do you guys have role models or people that you have in your head as the kind of career that you're trying to create?
Interesting. There are millions of them. There's so many people who have inspired me, particularly women who've inspired me to do what I do. The landscape is changing so much that it's hard to mimic anyone's career kind of move for move. It's more like you want to mimic the spirit of somebody's career. It's like, you know, everyone from, you know, Elaine May to Gilda Radner to Maya Angelou. Like, I'd like to go on a book tour on my own tour bus, and I'd like to, you know, have, you know, a beautiful apartment on the Upper East Side, and I'd like to, you know, make women feel less alone. But there's going to be a different way of doing that because of the different way that careers are taking shape now.
Emma Thompson has another career where it's just, I mean, what she's done is absolutely amazing.
What? Who'd you say? What's a good answer? Do you have something?
I know it's so hard to follow that. Yeah, I mean, I am inspired by so many different people. It is a balance. You have people that you look up to and people that you watched when you were younger, and you also are very aware that you have to be you know, you have to be your own person, and you're making choices that other people or that people think are great. But I mean, it sounds so whatever. But like,
is there a specific person that you just have found inspiring, or that you think about as a?
I mean, Lorne Michaels to me is I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him, and I also look up to him for for advice, and he's really helped me a lot creatively too at the show. I mean, he was so great to work for, and he's definitely someone that's very important to me.
I want other people's money, but I want my career.
It's the best answer
Yeah,
ever.
that's good. Forget it. She won.
Yep. Hands down.
This is off the cliff, but I want to talk a little bit about romantic comedies, because I feel like there's something very fascinating about the way in which female storytelling is often responsive to, is compared to, is haunted by romantic comedies. There are a lot of TV shows, including yours, that deal specifically with romantic comedy. And sometimes I think of, the way a show like The Sopranos dealt with mob stories, or Deadwood dealt with westerns. Sometimes other shows kind of wrestle with romantic comedy, and actually I think that's about Bridesmaids, a little bit about girls as well. I wonder, do you like romantic comedies? Does this feel like something that is, I mean, I know you like romantic comedies. Is this something that you enjoy? I mean, when Bridesmaids
I love
was...
romantic comedies.
I love
You like them?
Yeah.
Which ones?
I love I love When Harry Met Sally. I love Jaws. Watch it again. You'll see. I'm so bad at coming up with like, what's your favorite? I'm not good at that.
I know, and I keep attacking you with these
I know,
specific-
and I'm just,
I love romantic comedies where the obstacle is people's own shit, as opposed to,
Like
there's
getting
a
a guy.
storm, and or or
Was
whatever.
that- were you shading forces of nature?
Yes, I'm shading for
love
no,
forces
no,
of
or
nature.
just like where it's your own neuroses or your own shit that's getting in the way, as opposed to like supernatural or
The giant cake fell on you.
yeah. I think that too often like there's a gimmick in romantic comedies lately, as opposed to just like it's not working because of your own baggage. And I think that makes it, I mean, like Harry Met Sally, whatever, like they didn't work because of their own shit. And it made it so much more interesting. And I think the formula for romantic comedies of late has gotten just too wacky, and they're so delicious, and I think I crave them, and I'd love to see more, but
I'm interested in the way that Mindy's sort of deconstructed the idea of the romantic comedy, and so much of your show is about the influence romantic comedies. While having certain sort of like tropes of the genre, it's really about the way that romantic comedies have like affected women's perceptions of love, and like what that, I don't know if you feel like that's accurate, but it's almost an
completely.
analysis of the
well,
way.
they can also be really destructive.
Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
analysis of the way growing up on a diet of rom-coms can sort of affect the modern woman, and that, because
Yeah,
that was never
so much.
my thing. I used to just like hang out at Tower Video and rent. Basically, Jenny, Connor, and I always joke that our genre of movie is like Sundance 1995. Like if someone's like shooting up or working at a video store, like that's what I want to watch. But I'm interested in the way that romantic comedies have like shaped the minds of women.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most harmful things romantic comedies do is that they sort of, that when a couple gets together, that's the end of why they're interesting.
Yeah.
So many people thought, when Chris Messina's character and my character got together, it'd be like, well, that takes out all the tension, and that's just so sad. Like, it's like, if you have interesting characters, they will be interesting even when their love problem is solved, because love is so complicated in itself, and especially now, it could disappear. And so I thought that was something that, the marriage plot, as everyone knows, that is it. But then also, part of the romantic comedies is like when you see a bad one or one that insults your intelligence, it makes you just hate the whole thing. Whereas if I see a bad action movie, I'll still go back and see the next whatever Marvel Comics movie. But if you see something else, it just hits too close to home. It's like it really, but then so many movies, to the point where movies that are so good, you sort of forget that that's what, like Vicky Cristina Barcelona, The American President. These are romantic comedies that they're like, oh no, they're too good to actually be romantic comedies, because romantic comedies are so terrible.
Yeah.
But it's great. And
Silver Linings Playbook was romantic
comedy. And a dance movie.
Yeah, that's incredible.
That's true.
Yeah.
No one's calling David O. Russell out on that.
Yeah. And it's,
Oh no.
it was just
That
a
was
good
a
movie.
verite
Yeah.
masterpiece. No, it was incredible, but you're right.
I'm going to ask.
It's basically Footloose.
But I mean, like, but like you're the worst at trying to do the romantic comedy with really fucked up people, and I think it's interesting, and I'm really enjoying that.
I'm going to ask one question about filming sex scenes, and then we're going to go to questions from the audience. Because I always like to ask at least one question about filming sex scenes, because people are interested in the subject.
She did some really good ones in Hate Ship, Love Ship that I thought about for days.
I am going to leave the theater and immediately go see Hate Ship,
Yeah,
Love
we
Ship,
all
by the way,
It's
'cause
so
I haven't
good,
seen
but
that
it's
movie.
her and Guy Pearce and. Sorry.
No, it was fun.
Jenji and I did a panel last year where I asked about, specifically about when you're filming a sex scene or a romantic scene, do you think about who the audience is for it? And are you concerned about turning people on, making people laugh? Like, do you think about, like, is that something that's important to you in it? But I actually there was a scene on TV this year that was specifically about filming a sex scene that I wondered if you've seen The Comeback.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So there was this incredible scene that really captured what it's like to film, specifically that kind of prestige cable sex scene. She has to, Lisa Kudrow's character has to give a very humiliating blowjob, and basically she has to be a huge good sport during it. I wondered if you've seen the scene, what you thought of the scene, how much it rang true to you, and also I actually wondered about the situation when you're creating a show of being on the other side and getting other people to do sex scenes. Have you ever been in the position of feeling like that sort of, like what's it like to negotiate other people doing sexual things on screen? Some of you do that more than others.
It's really hard. It's really hard because it's asking people to be vulnerable and exposed and cold and unnatural and awkward, but I think it's often really necessary for a story.
Yeah.
And it's a huge negotiation.
How do you do it?
Beg and plead and sign papers and close the set and offer wine and
Tell people they're going to win Emmys.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
a big one.
yeah, and there's all sorts of little tricks and cajoling and.
And sometimes you do have an actor who's a really great sport who goes, I understand why this is important to the story, and I'm in, and I'm ready. And sometimes you don't.
And sometimes you'll hire a body double, and then the actor will do it if there's a body double sitting on set ready to do it. And
wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We've never hired a body double. That's so.
And sometimes you paint things out later when they freak out, and sometimes they go for it, and other days they don't feel as good about their body and they won't, and it's complicated, and everyone has body issues and self-image issues, and it's asking a lot. It's all a dance.
I feel lucky in that, well, firstly, there's nothing that I've ever asked anyone to do that I haven't done like 15 times worse. So there is a precedent, and I can be supportive in a way that isn't just paying lip service to knowing what they're feeling. And I feel lucky that I think our cast really understands the purpose that sex scenes play in the show, and all they want to do is make everything feel as honest and natural and correct as possible. And by the way, I've gotten a lot of great notes on sex scenes from actors who go, this doesn't feel like where my character's currently at. Can we rejigger this a little bit? And we've been open to that. And by this point, I'm sure you feel this way on Orange too, by this point in the history of the show, a sex scene has become fairly uneventful. I mean, it's just everyone is so sick of our boobs on that set that.
But it's still a big deal for people, and it can still be complicated and hard, and it's a person-to-person thing. I wish everyone would get naked and simulate sex all the time, and they won't.
We should go to questions from the audience, because we got, I can barely see. It's this crazy situation, so.
Oh, hey guys.
Wow.
Hello, oh yeah, there you are.
All the women that are here.
I know, good vibes.
Hello. Hey, thank you so much for this panel. It's been amazing. So I have a quick question. I was listening to Paul Feig speak the other day, and he said, he was asked about why comedy doesn't get maybe the recognition, or people don't use the word renowned about comedy very often, and he said something really smart, which was true comedy and great comedy feels effortless. And I was wondering, taking that quote, reflecting on your writing process, is there a time when you're writing and rewriting, like where you feel like, oh, this feels really funny and I trust this material, it feels effortless? Are there people that you go to? Do you trust yourself? How do you build those muscles when you're writing?
Well, the thing about writing comedy too is that something can seem really, really funny when you're writing it. And this happens a lot. And then you read it out loud and you think it's going to be, it's going to go over great, and then it's just silent. Mm-hmm. But the opposites happen too. I mean, I've had sketches at SNL that I would come in the day of table read, just stomach, like, we have to pull this sketch. It's terrible. We wrote it at 5 in the morning. And then it gets on the show. With comedy, I feel you have no perspective because there's two parts of it. The audience is a big part of if something is funny or not. I mean, ultimately you have your own voice and what you think is funny, but you never ever know. And rarely is it as effortless as it seems, I would think. I mean, I don't know.
I agree. There's a famous, in my favorite year, Peter O'Toole gets drunk and is hanging off a banister saying, "Dying is easy, comedy is hard."
Hi, my name's Jackie, and first, Kristen, I apologize. I did take your picture when you were on stage, and I didn't ask.
I don't care.
So I am so sorry. But
That's different. It's different.
That's different. I'm here.
That's not this. You're not like going up to her in the bodega and sticking your camera in
no,
her face.
I would never do
It's
that. I would never do that.
I didn't mean to.
No.
Piss
I
everybody
apologize.
off.
But
Also, she never would have known.
Yeah.
Yes. But then I just felt guilty. So, a question. So you're all, amazing, intelligent, impressionable women, and you have a lot of women and young girls who look up to you, globally. And I'm just curious, when certain events happen worldwide, how you guys temper maybe what you're really thinking about on social media, because that there's a lot, you could come out and say something politically, and there's so many young women who might not know what's going on and say, oh my gosh, Mindy said that, or Lena said that, so it must be true. So do you guys kind of temper some of your opinions in social media, or how do you handle that? Well, I know you don't, Lena. I guess I shouldn't have. Sorry.
I'm not really on social media that much. So.
When you said like some women might be like, oh, Lena thinks that, so it's cool. I'm like, great. Then everyone would agree with me.
I don't temper what I say, but also I know that if you have a responsibility, so if you put down your honest opinion, which is something I do a lot and often get some pushback against it, you also have to be responsible for engaging it continually. And I have like 2 full-time jobs. So often I won't opine because I'm like, oh, I have to go to set. And but I do like, I don't feel afraid to say what I feel on social media. I just do it. It can be a little time consumptive.
And hopefully the lesson people take away from it, young women take away from it, isn't that they have to share our opinions exactly. It's that there is a space for you to have a voice and to respond and to be an active, engaged citizen and to, have an opinion on something beyond your outfit, but to really like engage with local politics, national politics, world politics. I mean, having an opinion is where you start.
Hi, okay. So circling back to the first question that we were talking about, this question is to the whole panel. Being successful women in an industry that's predominantly where the major decision makers are male, like in the beginning of your creative journey, what was the driving force that made you continue in this path, knowing these roadblocks that laid ahead?
I mean, I'm driven by, I'll show you, fuck you. Like, it seems to be, I seem to feed off of that for some reason. It's probably, I don't know if it's healthy or not, but whenever someone says you can't, it seems to fuel me. So I just kind of kept coming back.
I have a personality defect where I sort of refuse to see myself as an underdog, and it is like gotten me into a lot of trouble, but is also for the reason for my success. And I often am reminded of it when people ask me why I'm confident or why I do this. I'm like, why wouldn't I be? I mean, this is because of my parents thinking they raised me with the entitlement of a tall, blonde, white man, I guess. So if that's a way to do it, is just, you know, picture yourself as Army Hammer on the outside.
See, I had the opposite.
That is great advice.
I had my mother said that women aren't as funny as men, and maybe I should think of other things.
Really?
Yeah.
No.
Like I had a different thing, but it all works.
Yeah, I like doing things that make me uncomfortable. I don't know, like if I'm reading something and it is maybe a script that I really like, but I'm scared to do it, or there's a scene or something that really terrifies me. I like that because I get bored easily. And I don't know, if you love what you're doing, it's like I do what I do because I can't help it. I love it.
Do you have a?
I mean, it's versions of all of these, and just that sense that I think that I personally grew up in a world where I wasn't being told by my parents or by my teachers or by the people surrounding me that, you know, my gender, my sex organs were going to be a limitation of any kind. And it wasn't until I was already in too deep that I even understood what was going on out there. So here we find ourselves.
I was wondering if you could each comment on the political issue that's closest to your heart.
Yikes.
I don't know what's going on in the world. No, I'm just kidding. I don't want to go first, though. I'm going to say what you
so
say.
many.
Yeah.
You can say more than one.
Okay.
I don't even know if this is a political issue, but I do think that, oh God, this is going to sound so dumb. Like, I think it's important to know where your food comes from. But I do. And the food that's in schools right now is the worst food. The grade of meat they eat is like below what they will allow in supermarkets. And I think it's really terrible because it affects how we learn, and it affects our health is our lives. And I think that's something that people should pay attention to.
I just think in general, across the board, something I find myself railing against everywhere is just fundamentalism in all its forms. Just that absolutism, black and white vision of everything is just something I can't abide, and that I find myself coming up against over and over. That's my big bugaboo.
For me, it's reproductive rights and justice. The idea that women can't be equal citizens until they have complete and total control over the destiny of their own bodies. And the idea that we're still fighting this fight, 42 years after Roe versus Wade was passed. It's 42 years, right, Karen? Yes, got it right. And the idea that something that women in what is supposed to be, our freest nation are still fighting for every single day. And it's not just a political issue. It's not just a religious issue. It's not just a political issue. It's also a lot about class, and it's a lot about race, and it feeds into all of these other forms of inequality and injustice that exist in our country. And by focusing on that, I think we can eliminate inequality and injustice in a lot of other forms. And then connecting to that, and something I'm really excited about is that Hunting Ground is here at the festival, a film that talks about campus assault. And one of the reasons it's important to talk about campus assault is because women on college campuses actually are some of the most privileged women with the loudest platforms to tell their stories. Most of them are middle class, most of them are white, and they still can't be heard as survivors of sexual assault. So think about what that means that these women in positions of incredible privilege are still being forced to fight every day for their truth, and the fact that that is indicative of the fact that sexual assault is an epidemic and so many people are voiceless. And so even though campus assault could almost be perceived as a little bit of a red herring that prevents us from looking at the fact that like sexual assault is everywhere and women are never heard. I think that campuses are a great place to start because that's where we're being educated and that's where we're told we're going to be safe.
I think reproductive rights, I mean, I play an OBGYN on my show, and reproductive rights are hugely important to me. My mother was an OBGYN, and of course, I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I live in West Hollywood, so being able to get a safe abortion, the fact that that is something that women, especially young women, would fear being able to get is, I think that's scary and important to me that women have access to that. Also, largely, you know, as an issue, I find it very sad. So many girls who look up to me or are interested in me are young women of color who have been told that they are ugly and who feel that they are not normal. And I think that, I don't even know what like political organization would necessarily fall under this, but I think it's so important for us to just sort of, women who look like me or who look like different than me find themselves like that they can be beautiful or be objects of love and attention and affection. And I feel sad when people say like you were the first person that made me feel like that was possible because it's not represented in TV and film. So that is also very important to me.
And the cool thing is that the political organization is you.
Yes, I'm a one-person political.
We'll take one more question. You gotta...
Hi.
Okay. Okay, great. Mindy, that you said that, I am an Indo-Canadian woman and it's my first Sundance, and you've done that for me and all the women in my family, so thank you for that. I'm here as a producer of a film about women CEOs and entrepreneurs that we're hoping to submit for next year, and we doubled our Kickstarter goal and hit $124,000, and of the 65,000 people who saw the trailer, the Kickstarter trailer, there's a roar to have you as our narrator, so I'm planting that seed. I'm planting that seed, Dream Girl film, I'm planting that seed. But to all of you, there was a tipping point in your careers, and I'm curious what that was for each of you and what advice you'd give to your pre-tipping point selves. So thank you, ladies, so much for all that you've done for all of us.
Thank you.
What advice would you give yourself?
For a second, I
If
thought
you could
the
go
tipping
back
point was like the
in a
moment your
looper.
career tipped into disaster and like how you could have stopped it. Like I didn't understand it was a positive thing for a second, but now I hear you.
Just do it yourself. You know, I was at The Office, which is an amazing show, which launched the careers of so many people that I admire, and but it wasn't going to launch mine, and I had to write a book and write a pilot, and I had to do it myself, and that is, I'm like a broken record. This is what I say anytime anyone asks me, but that would probably be the advice.
I'm literally the same thing, which is I'm constantly telling young women specifically, tell the story that you want to tell the story that feels close to you. Don't try to predict what you think people in the industry want or what you think your friends want to hear or what you think your parents want you to do. I guarantee you, if you tell the story that's close to you and truthful to you, that it will resonate with other people because we're all so much less weird than we think we are. And you know, utilizing current technology, utilizing the internet, and it's the more positive side of the internet to sort of form a community and express yourself, and that to me is what's so valuable about being alive right now.
Just keep working. I mean, that every time something didn't work out, I wrote a new pilot. Like Weeds was my 17th pilot or something like that.
Wow.
And you just have to keep throwing your hat in the ring and buying that lottery ticket, and eventually, hopefully, something happens.
I guess I would say in being creative, pleasing the audience shouldn't be your #1 goal, because no one had, like, I'm basically saying, but no one has your voice. So what you write, if you think, oh, well, I don't think people are going to think this is funny, it doesn't matter. Like, you think this is funny, or you think this is beautiful, or you think this is sad. And a lot of times, you know, people will respond to that and say, like, well, I haven't heard that before, or I feel the same way. And to try to fit into a box that's already there is easier. and to just like make your own box.
And don't
Lady
have
panel.
sex. Don't have sex.
Have sex.
What? Don't have sex?
Just don't do it till you're well into your career, till you've handled all that stuff. It's too much of a mess.
Have sex constantly. And thank you for coming. No, thank you so much to all of you for a wonderful guest.